All right, good evening, everyone online, and welcome to the Clat Possible official YouTube channel. As discussed before in our daily newspaper analysis, the 1-year anniversary of Russian invasion into Ukraine required a dedicated session, and this session shall be taken by Satyam sir and I. So what we are going to dwell upon in this particular session is why this war occurred. Why is it that such a huge country like Russia felt the need to invade a country like Ukraine, right? What are the geographical vulnerabilities that are faced by a country like Russia, and what has happened over the course of 1 year? So let's begin without wasting more time with the very first thing, which is your geographical vulnerabilities, right? So here you can look at this particular map and you can see Russia, and it is such a huge country. In fact, it is the largest in terms of area. And why did it feel the need to go and invade Ukraine, and what all is included here? Let's start with the very first thing. So this is the largest landmass, like I already have discussed with you. The area is about 17,000 square kilometers. In fact, it crosses 11 time zones. So you can well imagine, I mean, you've looked at the map and you can also well imagine the size of this particular country, considering the fact that there are 11 time zones in this country. So let's talk about the very beginning of Russia. You know, how did this entire thing even start? So we are talking about the 9th century, where the East Slavic tribes, also known as the Kievan Rus Federation, they were around this area called Kiev, right? So the capital of Ukraine, there's another spelling that you can use. So this is not incorrectly spelled. So these people, the East Slavic tribes, were largely in Kiev and across the Dnieper River. Now, you have to understand, wherever we are doing any kind of settlement with respect to any civilization, and if we want to make a sovereign country, we need to be saved by virtue of mountains or other natural defenses. In case a country has those natural defenses, it becomes very difficult to attack that particular country. Now, what happened to these people? That they were very, very vulnerable because they did not have any natural defense. No mountains or anything was surrounding them, making it difficult for the enemies to attack. It was rather simple for the enemies to attack, actually, because they were surrounded by grasslands. And so hence, over and over again, this particular area was invaded by the Mongolian tribes. And which is why the East Slavic tribes then later on went and they settled down in the city of Moscow. Now is when they started expanding their empire. Now, these are the early Russians, right? So they started expanding their empire. In fact, they expanded it to such a great degree. Before that, the city of Moscow, where these people were residing, was also known as the Grand Principality of Moscow. So this is what was the name given to earlier Russia, right? So by the 16th century, even the Terrible, he became the first Tsar of Russia. So he was very good in his military tactics and he expanded the territory. So much so that it expanded up till the Arctic Circle, to the Ural Mountains, you can see it over here, and also the Caucasus Mountains, the Carpathian Mountains. So, you know, he was able to also capture the Siberian Mountains. So the area expanded. Now, what was the issue? The issue was this one particular region over here. Of course, we will talk about the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the USSR and all of that. But you need to understand this particular portion for you to be able to get the reason why Vladimir Putin felt that it was necessary to invade Ukraine. I'm not justifying it. I'm just stating facts. Before I say anything further, we are not pro any country. We are not anti any country. We as India are very, very neutral, as we should be, because we are a sovereign country and we have the authority to do that. So what we are doing today in this particular session is just stating facts, right? Now that we have that clear, let's talk about this. So this particular area of Russia, the western side, there is this little funnel that you can see. So you see, this area is a plain area. This is also called the North European Plain. and it becomes very, very narrow around Poland, and it branches out. And in fact, it gives a very right and very plain area wherein a person can start moving towards Moscow. And has this area been invaded in the past through this particular funnel? Yes, it has. What is this called? This is also known as the Polish funnel because of the area. So yes, they have been attacked in the past because it gives a very flat route till Moscow. It is a very easy way to attack Russia by the Western countries. So Poland and Swedish and Napoleon French and Germany, they've all utilized that particular area to invade, to attack Moscow in the past. Right, so it was very important to create a buffer zone. बहुत important हो जाता है कि यहाँ से enemy ना आए, because बाकी जगहों पे तो we have mountains, we have natural defenses, but we don't have any natural defenses out here. Okay, so it was important to create this buffer zone to control the Western influence. And according to Stalin, you must have heard of his name, you know, he was the one who basically had this idea to make Russia a huge country, a huge economic power. So he was the former premier of the Soviet Union. So he basically said that this area is something that we need to look at. In fact, every czar of this particular area has always spoken about this. So till now, we have realized that Russia started off as a very, very small area. Eventually, they went to Moscow, the tribes, and then they started expanding their area. Now comes the watershed year of 1991. Wherein there is disintegration of the Soviet Union. So, of course, everybody must have heard of this, that in the past, you know, whenever we talk about India's history, we always talk about this thing called the Cold War. You know, so then there were these two powers, these great powers. One was the United States of America, and the second was the Soviet Union. And, you know, these were developed countries. And they used to keep telling these developing countries that in case you want to become developed in the future, you come and, you know, make an agreement with us. In fact, they used to tell us what to do, and so as to be able to become developed countries. And they had this little bit of a tiff. It was a Cold War. A Cold War is basically a war of power, of influence. So the Soviet Union did have a lot of influence, but because of many, many factors, and prime amongst those factors was the fact that there was no democracy over here, and people felt the need for a democracy. That and many other reasons. So, for example, you know, back in the day in the Soviet Union, in fact, you must have read about this in your economy, that when Jawaharlal Nehru had gone to the Soviet Union in the early 1900s, he was very, very impressed with the way they were working. In fact, we got three things from the Soviet Union: our 5-year plans, a dominant public sector, and central planning. But there was one thing that we could not do, and that thing was that we as Indians have the concept of a private property. Back in the day, before 1991, Soviet Union did not have a concept of a private property. So that, amongst many other reasons, led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So again, you know, because of the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the landmass of Russia, which by the way is the largest in the world, became smaller, right? So this was basically a combination of 15 republics. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was like a combination of 15 republics, and the largest was Russia. So you can see it over here: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, you know, and also Russia. So things like one-party system, lack of democracy, lack of freedom of speech and expression, and excessive expenditure on defense rather than doing expenditure on infrastructure. These are the reasons why this happened. And right after this happened, now you have to understand that we started off this entire discussion and we focused upon geographical vulnerabilities. And secondly, we said that, you know, we need these natural defense forces. So let's keep that aside. That is something that we've spoken about. Now let's talk about trade. Today, we talk about multimodal transportation. So not only are we doing transportation via air or land, we are also using water like we used to even in the past. Now, what happens is in Russia, it does not have a lot of warm water ports. सो कैसे पोर्ट्स है? ऐसे पोर्ट्स हैं जो पूरे साल में majority basis पे iced है, तो वहां पे से obviously the ships are not going to be able to pass. So obviously Russia requires access to a particular port that has warm water from where it can do its transportation and thereby increase its trade and also earn a lot of money. So despite the fact that it has 23,000 miles of coastline, it has lack of access to warm water ports, which are ice free throughout the year. So because of this lack of access to the oceans throughout the year, this is another issue that they are facing. So for example, you must have heard about the St. Petersburg. And if in case you haven't, right next to this area, when Ukraine was invaded by Russia, a lot of Russians were staging a protest against Vladimir Putin, saying, we are not the ones who want to invade Ukraine. It's not Russia, it's just Putin, right? And well, another reason why St. Petersburg is very, very important is that back in 2022, there is something called the INSTC, right? INSTC is a transport corridor through which for the very first time, India received around 40 crates of wooden laminates from Russia, right? So this happened last year, and it was last year that this particular corridor, the INSTC, was operationalized. And those wooden laminates came from St. Petersburg port. So anyway, so all of these ports, you can understand that, you know, because they're iced majority of the year, they're not able to utilize this for transportation purposes. So the access to the ocean from these ports go through NATO countries. Now, this is something that you've been reading time and time again, and more or less whenever somebody talks about Russia, Ukraine, they basically start with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We started with geographical vulnerabilities because you have to understand why a country like Russia would find it imperative to attack or invade another country. Their thinking is a little different. If you start, I was just going through a lot of in newspaper articles and interviews of Russian diplomats who were basically talking about the entire war in a very different manner. You have to understand each and every country is sovereign and everyone has their version of the story. We just need to know the facts. Now, North Atlantic Treaty Organization was founded in 1949. If I can say it in very simple words, this is an organization of a lot of countries who basically say that if you are waging a war against any one of us, that will be considered as a war against us all, right? So back in 1949, with 12 founding members, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization came into being. Article 5 of this particular NATO agreement basically says that an attack against one is an attack against all. So US, Canada, and several Western European nations made this particular organization to ensure collective security, right? Not individualistic security, collective security. So as of now, it has 30 members. We can look at the membership over here. Sweden and Finland are about to join it, right? You have to understand for each and every international organization, there are certain protocols to follow to become a member of that particular organization. So in some time, we will also talk about Ukraine getting the observer status in the European Union. Does not mean that it has become a part of the European Union. In the same vein, Sweden and Finland have applied to join. In all probability, they will join very soon. But well, that is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What I'd like you to look at is this is Russia. And, you know, they have, you know, Poland, and down south, we'll talk about Turkey and all of that. So a lot of countries around it is also a part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So if we keep in mind the geographical limitations of Russia, we have to understand that through Poland was that Polish funnel, which is a very, very strategic area for Russia because it has been invaded in the past from that particular area. Now, in that area are certain countries which are a part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which basically says that if you attack one, we will consider it as an attack on all of us, right? So they are one unit. So that is what is in Vladimir Putin's brain, as per my understanding. Well, you never know, but I guess. Now, so what were we talking about? We were talking about ports and we were talking about frozen water. So then I told you that in case a ship has to leave one of the ports from Russia and it has to go, and it has to go into the ocean, it has to go through a certain route. And that route, fortunately, is, through a North Atlantic Treaty Organization member country or an ally country. So for example, over here, you can look at the port of Vladivostok. Right, so this is Russia. This is a port in Russia. To go from this port into the Pacific Ocean, the ship has to pass through the Sea of Japan. Now, Japan is not a part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, it is an ally of the same organization. So that is one. Secondly, if you look at another example, there are plenty of examples. There's also St. Petersburg ka example. So sare ke sare nahi kar rahe hain, but major kar rahe hain so that you understand why this is happening. So port of Novorossiysk, right? Such tongue twisters these names are, right? So from this particular port, whenever a ship has to leave, it has to go through the Strait of Bosphorus. What is a strait? It is a narrow water body that is between two seas. So from Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara, if a ship has to go, it has to go through the Strait of Bosphorus, which is in Turkey, which is also part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this has already been dealt with by Satyam sir when we did earthquakes. If you remember, he had also quizzed you at the end ki kaun se year mein ye bana tha, North Atlantic Treaty Organization ka part. So this is why Russia is a little troubled. Now, let's talk about the annexation of Crimea. So this is what is your Ukraine, and in Ukraine there are certain areas. One of those areas is Crimea. So it was supposed to be a part of Ukraine, but it was annexed by Russia. But listen, hold on. Why would Russia annex it? And what is in it for Russia? Firstly, I just spoke about warm water ports. I will tell you why this happened. I will tell you the backdrop of this entire thing. Just one point from this slide, then we'll go ahead and we'll come back to this slide, okay? So what were we saying? That we need warm water for what? For trade. Now, in Crimea, there is this particular port called Sevastopol. And isko use karke, Russia can, do its trade. So that is one reason why it came over here. But itna easy ho jata hai, or itni badi area ko, a part of a country, if you go and annex that particular territory, this happened back in 2014. Tabhi G8, G7 ban gaye, because Russia exited from that G8 wala group. It was expelled actually because of this particular annexation. But to understand the annexation, let's understand a little bit about the politics of Ukraine. So of course, Clat and other law examinations will sometimes ask you very, very factual questions as to, sometimes they may ask you the name of the president. In fact, Clat even asked you the spelling of the name of the president, right? They could also possibly ask you the name of a political party. So let's understand this a little. If I can divide the political parties into some categories from Ukraine, I'll divide it into 3 categories. Okay. Now, the first category of political parties are those parties which say that Ukraine is a part of Europe. Ukraine is pro-European Union. Ukraine is pro-North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And we are a very, very liberal democracy. The second type, which is an extreme, opposite of the first category of political parties, says that we are not pro-European Union. We are not pro-North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We are not even that liberal. In fact, some of us are also pro-Russia. Now, you have to also understand, when we saw the map, forget Russia and Ukraine now. Let's talk about any other country. So, for example, let's talk about India. India में से partition होके west और east पाकिस्तान बन गया. और ईस्ट पाकिस्तान बांग्लादेश क्यों बना? बहुत रीजंस थे. उनमें से एक रीजन क्या था? That Pakistan basically said that our national language shall be Urdu. And the people in East Pakistan were basically Bengali-speaking people. Why were they Bengali-speaking people? Because you see, if you look at the map of India and the map of Bangladesh, the people who are going to live in the, at the border area, they will have common language and they will have common culture. So hence, in a very similar manner, when you look at Ukraine, there's a part of Ukraine or the population of Ukraine that is pro-Russia, right? The border that is with Russia, the people who are residing there, they're pro-Russia. And the people who are not residing there, the cultures are a little different and there's a little bit of a linguistic change. They are anti-Russia, right? So we are talking about East Ukraine and West Ukraine here. Now let's keep this in mind and let's talk about these people. So these are the presidents of Ukraine, over the past. So right now, of course, we know this is Volodymyr Zelensky. By the way, another fun fact, his grandfather was also part of I'll tell you what, Vladimir Putin basically said that when he sent forces into Ukraine, he wanted to denazify the entire area, which is quite ironical because his grandfather fought against the Nazis, right? So anyway, so Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, is pro-Western, right? Pro-European Union, pro-North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Why am I pointing towards this? Because I'm talking about the map. You have to think about the map when I'm talking, right? And his party is Servant of the People Party. Right before that, this gentleman, Petro Poroshenko, right? He was also pro-Western, pro-European Union. The guy that I'd like to talk about is this guy, Viktor Yanukovych. So he was the president from 2010 to 2014, after which he fled to Russia. Now, this guy was pro-Russia, he's pro-Soviet Union, he's a little Eurosceptic, ki nahi, unka part nahi banna hai, not very liberal in nature. Initially, when, he was very, very popular because his predecessor was quite corrupt. So, of course, he won the elections. But the minute he won the elections, there was one step that he has taken. What are we talking about? We are talking about Crimea, right? The invasion, the annexation. And because of which we are trying to understand why that happened. So what happened was, just within a few months of his becoming the president, what did he do? He made an agreement with Ukraine. He made an agreement with Russia. So the 2010 agreement between Ukraine and Russia. So over here is Dmitry Medvedev. He is the president at that time of Russia, and Vladimir Putin was the prime minister. So what did Ukraine say? Ukraine said that, listen, you purchase natural gas from us. As you all know, most of Europe is purchasing natural gas from Ukraine. So they said, we will give it to you at a discount. And how much of a discount? Like a 30% discount. And what will you do for us? You will extend the lease term of Russian naval fleet in the Black Sea at Sevastopol for the next 25 years till 2042. So Sevastopol ke baare mein abhi idhar piche chalte hain. This is the port that I'm talking about. So what is this agreement in 2010? That listen, we will give you cheap natural gas and you allow our naval fleet to be here so that we can do our trade or whatever we feel like doing. Now, the minute this agreement came into picture, people started having a bad sentiment against this particular president, the Ukrainians, the ones who were not pro-Russia, because they thought, why it's as simple as that, you're getting fuel at a less cost or natural gas at a less cost, and you're allowing some other foreign country to take care of your territory, to be there in your territory, and also to bring their artillery. That makes no sense, and some people didn't like it. So is why, there was a lot of public outrage with respect to this. Now, as a politician, whenever the next elections are going to come, you obviously want to understand the sentiments of the people and you want to align your political policies along with that. So that is what this chap also did. So after some time, he said, no, I don't want to do this agreement because people are not very happy with it. In fact, I want to make an agreement with the European Union. The minute he said that I want to make an agreement with the European Union, people were very, very happy. So you have to understand, every politician does that whenever elections are going to come up, and in case, there is the public really like some policy that is being announced, तो वो हर जगह बोलने लग जाते हैं उस particular policy के बारे में. So उसी time पे when this particular policy was being spoken of everywhere, there were certain protests that started. अब प्रोटेस्ट क्यों है? पीपल आर वेरी हैप्पी, क्योंकि फिर से उसने वही वाला काम किया, बोला यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ अग्रीमेंट करूंगा, फिर बोला नहीं करूंगा. जैसे नहीं करूंगा, पीपल वर लाइक यार दिस इज वेरी रॉन्ग, वी आर गोइंग टू डू दिस प्रोटेस्ट. सो पीपल हु वर प्रो रशिया एंड एंटी रशिया विद इन यूक्रेन, दे ओनली स्टार्टेड हैविंग लाइक अ सॉर्ट ऑफ लाइक अ सिविल वॉर. सो देयर वर लॉट ऑफ प्रोटेस्ट and in fact there were a lot of casualties. अब ये जब पूरा political turmoil हो रहा है, people are getting angry at their leader is eventually going to Russia. At that time Russia said, listen, this is the right time, लोहा गर्म है, मार दो हथौड़ा. ठीक, सो हम जाते हैं वहां पे, इसको इन्वेड कर देते हैं, और क्या ही करेगा, वो तो अपना ही देखी जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि उनका तो अपना ही कुछ तो political turmoil चल रहा है, because Euromaidan protests चल रहे हैं. And is when this annexation took place. The minute this annexation took place, it was very good for Russia, of course not very good for Ukraine, right? And a lot of different countries also came together and they started saying, no, this goes exactly against the concept of international law and you shouldn't be doing such a thing. Is why there is this organization that we keep reading about called the G8 countries. Russia was expelled from that particular organization back in 2014 because of this particular thing. In fact, he even went there and he conducted a referendum. Now, what is a referendum? Under direct democracy, referendum is when you go and ask the people कि भाई तुमको किसका पार्ट बनना है, तुमको रशिया का पार्ट बनना है कि तुमको यूक्रेन का पार्ट बनना है. So apparently this was done and people of that particular territory said, no, nothing doing, we don't want to be a part of Ukraine. This is what is told by Russia to us. Right? He also, in fact, installed a pro-Russian guy as the head of the Republic of Crimea at that time, Sergei. Right? And it declared it independent on 16th March 2014. तो अब ये वाला एरिया तो हमारे पास ऑलरेडी है, 2014 से है. ठीक है, रशिया के पास, हमारे पास नहीं. Okay. We have understood about this agreement. Now let's try and understand a little bit about what is this United States of America and Ukraine की relation. अभी इतना escalate क्यों हो गया ये सारी चीज? Why did it have to invade? अभी एक तो उसके पास पोर्ट तो आ गया है, he can do his trade and do whatever he feels like doing. Now, in 1991, United States of America immediately recognized Ukraine as an independent country. This is also a concept of international law, right? Whenever there is an independent country, you sort of recognize it. Most of the countries give it recognition, right? So USA recognized Ukraine and established diplomatic relations with it. Some may say कि अच्छा Cold War के time पे पोलैंड फनल यूक्रेन वहां पे है तो शायद इसलिए किया होगा, हमें क्या पता, हमें तो नहीं बताया ना यूएसए ने, हमें सिर्फ फैक्ट्स पता है. तो दैट इज व्हाट इज अ फैक्ट. The second is 1994. It helped Ukraine and Russia to come to an agreement on the elimination of Soviet nuclear weapon systems in Ukraine. So this is also something that it did. Now, I don't know whether you've heard about this or not, but there was a disaster, a nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. So this is a very, very famous disaster and it claimed a lot of lives. And in fact, even right now, when the Russian soldiers came to this particular place, and even when they were walking, you know, there's a lot of remnant of the nuclear weapons and, deposits, there are nuclear deposits over there. So in fact, the International Atomic Energy Agency has said that you should not bomb this particular place, क्योंकि अगर ये हो गया तो इसका impact बहुत disastrous होगा, not only for Ukraine but also for Russia and beyond, right? So that is something that is being spoken of. Now, Ukraine was also added to the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1994. What is this treaty all about? It basically says that, listen, if you have any intention of creating nuclear weapons, or if you have already created nuclear weapons, don't do it. Give them up, right? The nuclear weapons should only be with certain countries like the United States of America. And if in case you need, you need nuclear energy for certain non-disastrous reasons, like, for example, atomic energy can also be utilized to, send electricity. That is why Homi Bhabha was, given the entire center by Jawaharlal Nehru. So the Non-Proliferation Treaty is something that India is not a part of, because we don't think that it is very, very democratic and it makes no sense. Like, why can you have a nuclear weapon and we can't, right? So, but Ukraine became a part of it. Also, 1997 से partnership between NATO and Ukraine started. Now, I'm not saying that Ukraine is a part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization yet, but partnership started, like an ally. In 2003, Ukraine supported US invasion of Iraq by sending troops. So US looking at the bilateral relation between the two. And even in fact, right now, they are sending very high-tech artillery to Ukraine as why Ukraine is able to sustain this particular war for so long. And some critics also say possibly winning it. But we'll talk about what is winning a war and all of that. First, let's understand this. So अब हम लोगों ने इस एरिया के बारे में बात कर लिया जहां पे किसने एनेक्स किया 2014 में रशिया ने एनेक्स कर लिया. Now there are these two areas which are very, very important. One is Luhansk, the other is Donetsk. And you're looking at this, this is Russia and this is Ukraine. And this is the border area that I'm talking about. So you see, because it's a border area, it is seen there's a lot of pro-Russia mentality over here, and a lot of cultural similarities and linguistic similarities. So much so that there are a lot of separationists who are sitting over here. Separationists are basically people who say, I don't want to be a part of Ukraine. Not necessarily that I want to be a part of Russia, but I don't want to be a part of Ukraine. And in fact, that is exactly what is happening over here. The Donbas region, these two together are also called the Donbas region. In fact, not many countries have, recognized this as a separate country, but you see Russia has, and somewhere down the line, Russia has a lot of influence in these regions. Now we come down to two types of agreements. One is the Minsk Agreement 1 and the Minsk Agreement 2. क्या है ये अग्रीमेंट कि रशिया को बोला भाई अपना आर्टिलरी यहाँ पे भेजना बंद करो, ये सिविल वॉर वगैरह टाइप की चीज बंद करो, सीज फायर कर दो, stop sending your artillery and stop firing things and all of that and stop coming into our country. That is when we will sit over here, we will listen to these people and then we will ask them, do you want to be a part of Ukraine? Do you want to be a part of Russia? Or do you want to remain independent? Now this Minsk agreement, which was signed in 2014, so France, Germany, Russia and Ukraine, in सबने मिलके ये वाली एक treaty. So basically for Russia and Ukraine, France and Germany also came together and they were like, this is what you should do. But it failed. Why did it fail? We'll just come to that. The second one, in next year only, फिर से एक agreement sign करने की बात करी, फिर से fail हो गया. क्यों fail हो गया? Because Ukraine says complete ceasefire, which Russia doesn't do. Ukraine says withdrawal of the Russian weaponry, which Russia does not do. Full Ukrainian control होना चाहिए यहाँ पे, तो जाके referendum करेंगे या कुछ भी करेंगे क्योंकि हमारा देश है. Obviously is not happening. Russia says autonomy of the Donbas region. This is what we want. So there has never really been a ceasefire over here. Then comes Volodymyr Zelensky and he says, now I'm the one who's going to take care of this entire thing and I'm going to adopt something called the Steinmeier formula. So Frank-Walter Steinmeier, of course, German, this guy gave a formula. What did he say? He said Ukraine has to grant self-governing status to the territories of Donbas region. So self-governing, let them govern themselves because they're not clearly not happy with you, right? And only after conducting the local elections. Ukraine says, okay, Volodymyr Zelensky says, I will do this. But the first thing that I want from Russia is ceasefire, right? And withdrawal of all the Russian troops. That was his demand. And of course, what does Russia say? Russia says elections and autonomy first, and then everything else. So फिर से वो deadlock आ गया. Right? So again, this particular issue was still there. So I think this is a very, very famous photo where he's walking with Emmanuel Macron and all of that. So back in 2016, Ukraine and European Union, they made a free trade agreement. What is a free trade agreement? That, listen, we will do trade with one another and most of our goods will have zero duty. So like very easy access to market. Then in 2018, Ukraine launched large-scale air exercises with North Atlantic Treaty Organization in the Western Ukraine. Eastern में तो करेंगे नहीं, वो तो pro-Russia है. Western Ukraine में क्या? Clear Sky 2018 करके air exercises करनी शुरू कर दी. And now Russia is like, अच्छा, वो funnel भी है, Poland भी है, अब तुम NATO के साथ कर रहे हो, बाकी भी NATO की countries हैं और हम बुद्धू हैं. So maybe that is what they felt. Or whatever be the case, this is what is happening. And Of course, candidate status was accorded to Ukraine by the European Union. Some also ask, why is it that Ukraine is not yet a part of European Union as well as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? We'll deal with that later. First, let's talk about the facts. Okay, so now which are these territories that were first invaded by Russia? So on 24th of February 2022, the initial territorial gains were in 4 eastern provinces. Now you have to understand, now I will obviously invade those areas which are relatively easier for me. What is easier for me? Jahan pe sentiment zyada pro-Russia hai. ठीक है, so Luhansk, Donetsk, right, Zaporizhia, and also Kherson, right? ये तो already है हमारे पास, 2014 से हमारे पास है. So this is where we started off the initial territorial gains. And then there were a lot of airstrikes. So this is on the 24th of February. So these little icons, wherever you can see it, this is Chernobyl. We've already spoken about it, right? So बहुत ज़्यादा ये air attack हो रहे हैं. और ये वो वाले region है जो अभी हम लोगों ने किया था, Luhansk and Donetsk, and right, all of these regions are already, all of these, I don't know where am I going, just give me a second. So these are regions which are already under Russia. Now, areas under the occupation of Russian forces. What was Russia's mentality? It thought that Ukraine is not ready. Ukraine does not have those many people in their army. And secondly, they don't have the state-of-the-art machinery or the weaponry like us. Plus, we are going to attack them when they're least expecting it. And some also say that Vladimir Putin thought that this entire war will end in 3 days. It is very rightly said, you can start a war, but you do not know when will it end. And we can see it right now, 365 plus a few days later. Fine. So in mid-March, most of the areas were occupied by Russia. You can see this, ये जो faintly ऐसे pink वाले areas हैं, ये सारे के सारे Russia के पास आ गए. अब क्या हुआ कि वापस से लेने शुरू कर दिया यूक्रेन ने. In mid-November, what happened was, now you have to understand that, of course, right now Volodymyr Zelensky is also asking the West. He's like, भाई तुम अलग ही हो, तुम लोग हमें support करो, because तुम्हारे कारण ही तो we are pro you. What is the point of being pro you if you're not doing anything for us? So they started getting like the state-of-the-art weaponry, right? In fact, they also have these drones where they can attack with a lot of precision. So in fact, even in areas like in Crimea and other areas, अब क्या होता है ना, ये जो भी Russian troops जब भी जा रहे हैं तो ट्रक से जा रहे हैं, जब भी अनलोड करते हैं अपनी पूरी वेपनरी, बड़े प्रिसिशन वाले इनके एयर वाले वेपनरी है कि वो उसको तोड़ देते हैं, डिस्ट्रॉय कर देते हैं. And because of all of this artillery, what happened was a lot of areas could be gained back by Ukraine. Fine. In fact, as of now, if I talk about, let's talk about Kherson. So in March, 93% of this area was under Russia. As of now, only 73% is under Russia. So, thoda karke ye, they are getting it back. Some also say that this is why Russia might lose. Who knows? We'll talk about what is loss and what is a win in a war. Hai na? So Bucha is a place which was the epicenter of Russian atrocity. You must have heard about this. Civilians should not be touched in a war that is so unlike military. The basic training, of course, I understand collateral damage, but collateral damage should not amount to absolute atrocities, which can be avoided. So civilians should not be a part of it, but they were, and hence it's called a massacre, right? Now, if you talk about month by month, I said this is when it attacked, a lot of eastern Ukraine. In March, it had a lot of, Russia had invaded like a lot of Ukraine. April में अगर हम बोले तो Russian forces had pulled back from the capital, which is Kyiv. Right, and May में अगर हम बात करें तो बहुत सारे falls after week of bombardment and Ukrainian resistance. So Ukraine is really resisting it. Okay, you have to understand there is something called motivation amongst the troops. I'll share an anecdote with you. So in Ukraine, it is said by the critics, not by me, right? I'm no expert on this, but that is what is said, that Ukrainian forces are more motivated than the Russian forces. In fact, Vladimir Putin had also announced that now those people who are not in the army and who don't want to fight this war will also have to fight this war. So we saw that a lot of people tried to rush out of Russia. Even in fact, they were paying like 5 times the air ticket, and but they just wanted to get out. The most amount of Google search in Russia at that time when this declaration was made was people were looking at Google and trying to figure out how to break your arm. Why would they say that? Because they did not want to go to war, right? So motivation also plays a huge factor. And of course, artillery and weaponry and all also is important. Now, the next is, Ukraine retakes the Snake Island. So this was very famous in the news. Snake Island, mein jab Russians aaye the, so there were 15 Ukrainians, and these guys were telling them that, listen, we've taken over this and you need to surrender. And those chaps were like, of course, they were outnumbered. They knew that they were about to be martyred, but they were not very scared. And there's this entire video recording which was reported by a lot of newspapers. So they took back the Snake Island also. Now, US made HIMARS deployed. What is this HIMARS? This is high mobility artillery rocket system. Very, very important. High mobility artillery rocket system. What does this do? This basically allows Ukraine to, send their rockets in far-flung areas in Russia. ठीक है, हाई मोबिलिटी के साथ जा रहा है, नाम से पता चल रहा है, ठीक है. एंड ये पर्टिकुलर जो इनको इक्विपमेंट मिला है, इससे दे आर एबल टू रियली अटैक रशिया विद प्रिसिशन. एंड that's what this is, right? So August, they also Ukraine launches major counter-offensive in Kherson. I told you Kherson 93% was with Russia. Right now, only 73% is with them. So ऐसे करके they started taking back a lot of territories. November to December was good for Ukraine. And now Joe Biden is also saying that I'm going to put unilateral sanctions on many, many countries if they start, doing something or trading with Russia. Why can't the UNSC put these sanctions? Because of the fact that Russia is, fortunately, one of the P5. And P5s have a veto. What is P5? Permanent 5 countries who have a veto power, right? Now let's talk about India. पहली बात तो ये है बेटा, यूनाइटेड नेशंस जनरल असेंबली कोई सैंक्शन नहीं लगाता है, वो रेजोल्यूशंस पास करता है. अगर वो सैंक्शंस लगा सकता है तो पैलेस्टीन अभी एक इंडिपेंडेंट कंट्री होती. तो रेजोल्यूशन आफ्टर रेजोल्यूशन इज नॉट रियली गोइंग टू डू एनीथिंग. दे हैव टू टेक इवन स्ट्रॉन्गर, बेटर स्टेप्स. एंड if you talk about India, and a lot of people have, criticized India with respect to this, because whenever there has been a UNGA or a UNSC vote, more or less we have abstained from voting, except for one where we allowed virtual participation of Volodymyr Zelensky in a particular session of a plenary meeting of the UN General Assembly. Now, why are we abstaining from voting? Because we are a sovereign country. We need to look at our own interests. Does that make us a bad country? No, not at all. Everyone will look at their own interests. You will also look at your own interests if push comes to shove, and that does not make you a bad person. That makes you a smart person, right? We are not obviously going and handing over weapons to another country and saying, जाओ जाके मारो किसी और को. But हमें भी अपने देश को देखना पड़ेगा. We have to look at our own economy, right? So keeping all of that in mind, this is what is our stance. Fine. So, there were a lot of resolutions basically to put a lot of sanctions upon them. UN, WTO, UNESCO, WHO, ICJ, UPU, Universal Postal Union. These are all UN specialized agencies, right? ILO, International Labour Organization, International Telecommunication Union, World Intellectual Property Organization. So we've mostly abstained from voting in all of these cases. This is important, Operation Ganga, which was basically done by the government of India. And why did we do this? Because we wanted to evacuate the people, the Indians who were stranded in Ukraine at that particular time. right? 24/7 control centers हमने दिए थे to assist the evacuation of Indians through the borders crossing points with Hungary, Poland, Slovak Republic, Romania. And the Twitter handle where people could basically come and ask for help was called the Off Ganga helpline. This is something that we can keep in mind. Now, another thing which was in news was the Nord Stream. ठीक है, दो चीजों के बारे में बात करेंगे, दो बेसिक बहुत बड़े इम्पैक्ट पड़े हैं. एक हमारे फूड पे, primarily wheat, and secondly gas prices. So what happened is whenever Russia, so what does Russia do? Russia gives a lot of natural gas, sells a lot of natural gas to European countries. And how does it do that? It does that through many pipelines, and amongst those is something called the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay, so you can look at it over here. It starts from Vyborg in Russia. It is written here. So Vyborg in northwest Russia to Lubmin in northeastern Germany. 1,224 kilometer long pipeline is running over here. Why is this in news? A certain somebody who is, of course, United States of America is completely denying it. This guy, अच्छा चलो इसके बारे में हम 2 मिनट में बात करते हैं, इसकी बात कर लेते हैं. तो नेचुरल गैस हम लोगों ने कर ली. एक चीज, एक फैक्ट लर्न करो. द कंपनी बिहाइंड दिस एंटायर नॉर्थ स्ट्रीम पाइपलाइन इज नॉर्थ स्ट्रीम एजी, व्हिच इज एस्टैब्लिश्ड इन स्विट्जरलैंड इन पार्टनरशिप विद जर्मनी. ठीक है. अब what has happened is that there is a journalist called Seymour Hersh, okay, and he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. And what does he say? He says in the mid-summer of 2022, this is an operation that is done by the CIA of the United States of America. They send few divers under the garb of the fact that, oh, we are conducting like a military exercise, and they go and they destroy these pipelines. Right. And some also say that they had help from Norway. But however, we don't know because we will never know about it. Ki kya sahi hai, kya galat hai. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is this Nord Stream pipeline, it became operational in 2011. Looking at this, that, okay, this is giving us a lot of business. Let's open another pipeline. So Nord Stream pipeline 2 was also supposed to be made. But just 2 days before Ukraine was invaded by Russia, which is the 22nd of February in 2022, Germany basically withdrew from this particular pipeline, the second one. The first one was there, and of course, it has been damaged, allegedly by United States of America. It is a project to carry natural gas from Russia to Germany and other countries in western and southern parts of Europe. Now comes another fact that you can keep in mind. Back at that time, when all of this was happening, German Navy chief had to resign. So that's his name. And why did he have to resign, this guy? Because he went and he praised Vladimir Putin. He said he should be seen with a lot of respect, XYZ. Now, is that because of the fact that, Germany gets a lot of natural gas from Russia, and in case it can't, then it will have to look at alternative options, and that will be bad for the country? We don't know. But that happened, after which this guy had to resign from his post. So we spoke about the natural gas. Now, the second thing we are going to talk about, SWIFT ke bare mein 2 minute mein baat karte hain. Second thing that we are going to talk about is grain. So now you know that mostly, some of the ports of Ukraine, they are under Russia's control. And Ukraine is a country that is exporting a lot of grain to the rest of the world, right? And Russia is also exporting a lot of Russian grain and fertilizers to the rest of the world. Now, in case that stops, obviously that will be very, very bad for other countries. So they want the entire trade to start as soon as possible. And so hence something called the Black Sea Grain Initiative was taken up, right? And this particular thing was basically made so that, the halted shipments can start and nobody is going to go and attack these ships, because agar ek particular source jahan se hame grains mil rahe hain, agar wo nahi milenge, ab aap dhyan mein rakho, in 2022, because of the heat wave and all of that, which is something that we are experiencing even right now, wheat production was very less. But India contributes to mere 1% of the global export of wheat. Ukraine, Russia together contribute 25% of the global trade in wheat. And agar wahan से नहीं आएगा तो अगर कम है, डिमांड ज्यादा है, सप्लाई कम है, and the prices will shoot up. There will be a lot of inflation, which is exactly what was happening, right? So Ukraine is one of the largest exporters of wheat and corn and sunflower. Because of Russia's invasion, there was a naval blockade. So the deal was made for the safe passages of these ships. But this deal was taken back by Russia in October 2022. So basically, Russia says nothing doing. I don't want to do this. Why? Because there are a lot of drone attacks that are being done by Ukraine on us. And keeping that in mind, I'm going to suspend this. So अगर ये करेगा तो फिर से वही inflation वाली problem आ जाएगी. Now we can come on to the second last point. One is SWIFT sanctions on Russia. We've taken this up in the daily newspaper analysis also. I don't know whether you've read it or not. I will tell you in very simple words. So SWIFT basically stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, a society for worldwide interbank, एक बैंक से दूसरे बैंक में financial telecommunication. This SWIFT system does not move money from one country to another. It basically ensures that when money is moved from one bank to another in a different country, the message is received and there is a repository of all of these financial information and no one can do anything about it, so that मतलब एक तो repository रहे, दूसरा थोड़ा safety ensure कर देता है. अब क्या है? It is a secure platform for financial institutions to exchange information, operates as a middleman to verify information of transactions. कि अगर मैंने बोला है कि इस बैंक से इतना पैसा उधर गया है तो वाकई में वो पैसा जाना चाहिए, उनको मिलना भी चाहिए, settlement होनी चाहिए. Right? So where is it based out of? It is based in Belgium and it is overseen by the central banks of 11 industrial countries. These are the names of those countries: US, UK, Germany, Belgium, Canada, France, Italy, Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland and Japan. तो अब इसके ऊपर सैंक्शन लगा दिया रशिया के ऊपर कि भाई इसकी फाइनेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस का हमने कुछ नहीं करना, इसको नहीं, वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू गिव इट अ सिक्योर प्लेटफॉर्म. व्हाट डज रशिया से? रशिया सेज नथिंग डूइंग, आई विल मेक माय ओन, बट इट हैजंट बीन एबल टू कम अप टू दैट एक्सटेंट. आई मीन इट इज नॉट रियली अ कंपेटिटर ऑफ स्विफ्ट येट. Russia had also asked India that, allow us to make a financial institution on your particular soil so that those sanctions are not there upon us because we are operating out of India. Let's see if that happens anytime soon. It is reported that Russia is also collaborating with China on a possible venture which could challenge this SWIFT system. Because you have to understand, whenever I'm making a transaction, I will never make a transaction even if I have an iota of doubt that this is not a secure platform. By ₹1 भी होगा अगर बैंक में तो मैं क्या ही भेजूंगी, ₹100 भी होगा अगर बैंक में तो भी नहीं मैं करूंगी, क्योंकि मुझे मेरा ₹100 है ना, मुझे नहीं जान, I don't want to put it on an I don't want to put it on a platform which is not secure, right? So that is that. And the last thing for today from my side, and then Satyam sir will take up the discussion further. So China's peace proposal for Russia-Ukraine, 24th of February 2023. So, everybody is talking about something or the other. So China basically says, I'm going to make a peace proposal. I'm going to give you 12 pointers on the day of the 1-year anniversary. I don't like using the term anniversary for a war, but well, for want of a better word, for a 1-year anniversary of the war, right? So it says respecting sovereignty of all countries. It's a little funny though because of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. पर चलो ठीक है, जिसके लिए अच्छी बात है बोला है. Abandon the Cold War mentality. खत्म करो उसको. सारे बहुत अच्छी countries हैं. It is not just USA and erstwhile Soviet Union. Other countries are also doing very well. अपना देखो और अच्छी तरह से अपने पैसे बनाओ. एक दूसरे के ऊपर अटैक करना बंद करो. Cease all hostilities, resume the peace talks, resolve humanitarian crisis, protect civilians and prisoners of war, keep the nuclear power plant very, very safe, reduce the strategic risks, facilitate grain exports, because obviously you're basically the reason why there's a lot of inflation, food inflation and fuel inflation. Food and fuel inflation को core inflation भी बोलते हैं. इन दोनों को इकट्ठों को core inflation बोलते हैं, right? And stopping unilateral sanctions, stop that, basically hinting onto the United States of America, keeping industrial supply chains stable, promoting post-conflict reconstruction. So these are the 12 pointers that are given by China. Let's see whether something happens or not. Volodymyr Zelensky has basically said said that I'm okay with it. I'm ready to talk about it. Let's see what happens from the other side. Right. So I'd like to invite Sir. I think, chalo, let's talk about a little bit till that time. Sir will come, right? Okay. So now what is the meaning of the end of a war? How do you say that a war has ended and who has won in a war? So according to military experts, how do we define when does a war end? The first thing is, who is the initiator of that war? किस इंसान की बात समझी जा रही है? कौन इंसान सारे steps ले रहा है, initiatives ले रहा है? So in this case, you see, Russia was the one that first invaded Ukraine, and initially we thought that the burden of the initiation part was with Russia. But of late, since United States of America and now even the G7 countries have said that they are going to export a lot of weaponry and artillery to Ukraine, we have realized that Ukraine also has the power of initiation. So that is like a draw. Second, then there is something called the war of attrition. War of attrition basically means that which country's troops are basically having more casualties. क्या यूक्रेन के troops की ज़्यादा casualties है, क्या रशिया के troops की ज़्यादा casualties है? We will never know the reality, but critics say that it is actually Russia, right? Not Ukraine. Secondly, is the motivation factor amongst the troops, right? Is it, are the Ukrainian force, the Ukrainian troops more motivated, or are the Russian troops more motivated? So I've already dealt with that. Patriotism जहाँ पे आ जाता है, जहाँ पे हमारा अपना कंट्री वाला फीलिंग आ जाता है, वहाँ पे कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा सा ज्यादा मोटिवेशन है यूक्रेनियन फोर्सेस में. मैंने जाके नहीं देखा, मैंने पढ़ा है. That is what I'm telling you, right? And so lastly, amongst, looking at all of this, the third thing that you have to keep in mind is the weaponry, the machinery. Of course, Ukraine has a lot of weapons, high technology weapons, but so does Ukraine. But the point is, कब तक यूक्रेन को बाकी वेस्टर्न पावर्स ये वेपन्स देंगी? अगर तो बंद कर देंगी देना, फिर तो प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी. अगर नहीं बंद करेंगी देना, then it will carry on. I think it is going to end when there is going to, both the parties will have to sit on a table and they will have to negotiate. And negotiation may be initiation किसके पास होता है? जिसके पास war में initiation होता है. So we'll have to look at that. All we can say is that this should end very soon, because that will be good for the global economy, and forget global economy, it will be good for humanity, right? So I hope you guys have understood. Wait a second. Let me just get back. All right then. Satyam sir, I think I've taken up a lot of time, and Satyam sir is busy with the class right now. So I think we will see him the next time, right? I hope you guys have understood, and thank you very much, and see you soon for the next session. Bye bye.